Hi there, Randy Green here. It is June 28th, 2022, just for the logging for people who might listen to this later on. What has put this in motion is, again, for those of you listening to this into the future, it is on the 25th this month, the Supreme Court in America decided to plunge America back into the Middle Ages and conflating the timelines with the timelines of the dark forces, which means that cycle 1, 2, and 3 will now be the prevalent cycles rumoring and running in the grids of America, which of course will have huge implications on the humans that are living in America. This will, of course, ripple into other countries based upon the similar configuration, and with that, change the surface of our planet slowly but surely to align with the Dark Avatar Collective as well as the Parallel Universal Matrix, which will run as cross sections of grid energies from where the Parallel Universal Matrix will be able to open up certain old gate systems as that joint alliance they have made in the attempt to recuperate and take over our entire planetary structure. That, of course, has ramifications because our original architecture of our solar system is not supposed to be connected to these different groups. And as it is in times of great difficulty and in times of shifts, measurements must be taken and things must be done to ensure that what belongs to the original worlds and what belongs to the true progressive nations must remain within their hands and not be handed over in defeat to occupying forces that are having what we could call a hostile intervention protocol. So that has put things in motion that will touch bases and will, for all of us that are doing the activation work, and it will change the planetary activation cycle. So let me begin first with the understanding for those of you who are a little bit new to this. Between 2000 and 2017, we had the planetary activation cycle that was supposed to activate the humanoid grids and networks, and with that, the racial lineages of the original incomers that mainly came here during the times of Atlantis, and we're here talking about 250,000 years ago with the first wave of refugees due to the timeline event and the scattering and destruction of many of the original reality fields that were positioned in what we call the fifth dimension. But sorry about that. But for those of us who have a different terminology, understanding that was the fifth cycle races due to unfortunate experimentation done in the Syrian system, set in motion a line of events that is called the timeline event, cycling many of the progressive cycles back into the third cycle configuration, and by that building a bridge to old worlds that we had left behind because of warring, superiority, ill-mindedness, evilness, and always in forms that you can envision if you add it into a technological context and not a demonic context, because that is something entirely else. So we are just talking about an absolute failure of worlds within galactic realms of the third cycle that literally went on the brink of complete extinction using technology in all its worst forms, and ended up being, let us just use an analogy you will understand, cyborgs or the movie The Matrix, you decide yourself, something like that. So we had to close the door effectively to that, and we agreed to remove all viable genetics and viable templates and viable energy systems to our solar system, where we then did what's called the restoration program to undo the effects of the timeline event. And the original constructions were rebuilt from its original scientific purposes. We were working here to transform energy in different ways and forms, connected to the original division between the true worlds and the less progressive universal structures that were made to support and accomplish the ones that were not ready to do the elevation cycle in the true worlds eons ago within the fourth cycle. So we build a new construction that's called the less progressive universe, and that's the universe we are part of, from where different races would be put into different workstations, which you know as different levels of reality, different realms that have different stargates within different constellations and different universal matrices. So that's what's been talked about in the Colontic sciences. That construction, Cathara grid is part of the LPU construction, and how the different matrices were built up in consecutive order so that there would be this step ladder upgrading process from what we call the lower levels and into the higher levels. But unfortunately, as we know, these projects collapsed and did not succeed. One system after another succumbed to the old configuration of the third cycle, superiority issue, ill-mindedness, and all sorts of colonizing tendencies for own survival and service to self purposes, as you know, those of you who have been into this material for some time. So the majority of the races around us are not progressive, they are not inclusive, they are not patiently awaiting for our participation in the upgrading cycles, but are colonizing, invading races to their own purpose and their own functionality to keep themselves afoot and keep themselves alive and keep themselves afloat, to use these expressions, using other civilizations to do so, while they are draining the civilizations into nothingness before they move on into another system. And that is why the planetary activation cycle has kicked in. But going back to the stellar activation cycle, that was supposed to activate and upgrade the humanoid genetics so that they could return to their original fifth cycle within the universal matrices that had rooms and space for these configurations of ancient levels of energy systems, because that is what has happened to our solar system. When it was hijacked 15,000 years ago, we were pushed further back in time into the third cycle, and therefore everything that we are having and are unfolding in this solar system and on this planet is of an archaic order that has really no similarity to the races around us in the progressive worlds and in what we call the more benevolent humanoid worlds that wants to reunite with the true worlds and the original universal elevation cycles. So that's we're under what we call the solar riches, and I'm deliberately putting them in past tense because they pulled out a month ago, I think. So they have decided that they tried the stellar activation cycle. They tried to activate, they tried to pull out, they tried to do what they could. They could not activate to the degree they wanted, so they chose a different solution, and that was to extract what was viable. And with that, just leave who was part of the original races behind, literally cutting them free, cutting them loose to do their own journey, putting different things into their energy system. It's called a mission statement that would, if people would do the work that they were supposed to do, following a specific set of teachings that they would get from within and not from outer sources, would activate these different levels, inserted configurations that would then link them up to different kinds of host fields that were individually targeted for that specific energy system, and therefore not a joint host field, because everything that goes together as a joint host field is just a matter of one getting affected by AI and get their energy system shredded and torn to pieces and reconfigured into the AI configuration. Then that entire host field would collapse and be taken over by AI, which is one of the third cycle great issues we had in the third cycle after the timeline event. That literally took away huge portions of viable systems in our galaxy. Unfortunately, that type of AI technology has been reactivated with the return to the dark ages of many nations on our planet and reverting into older understandings where males are superior and females are a sub-race that is just supposed to be breeders or whores, to put it mildly, because that's the configuration we're talking about. Just look into ancient history on our planet and you will see that's how women have been treated in all times on this planet, and that has been for a very good reason, which of course in the fourth cycle in the Western worlds and under different religious systems under the old world order were tried to be made into something less negative and more beautiful, playing different programs where the institution of marriage and childbirth were given connotations of something extremely beautiful. And one of the main things women could contribute with, where males would contribute with sciences, ideologies, and the monetary system, building a new civilization, bullshit programming. Sorry for saying so. Okay, so going out of the base program again, and that institution going back up into the more galactic scenery. So the stellar activation cycle did not succeed to the degree it was set out to do. It did succeed on 10%, so that's kind of a win, but not 90%. 90% were left behind. With inbuilt configuration for those of you who are part of the solar Rishi system and the humanoid worlds, you are now on your own and you need to do what is coming from within and not relying on different outer sources that claim to be part of the stellar activation cycle and claim to teach you what was taught there. What you were to learn were taught between 2000 and 2007. Then it changed because the humanoids and the whole stellar level, the systemic level that goes with density 2, went into evac on 2007 when the sun began its shutdown processes. Its finalizing stages is devastation cycles, where it began to shed off its radiation fields and vibrational fields, which were completed here in 2022. So the sun is no longer giving off density 2 energies, but are now what we understand as a kinetic sun in its devastation cycle that goes with everything that we know of in the universe. It begins to burn off enormous amount of energy. And as it does so, the magnetic field around it changes. The numbers of coronal mass ejections will be higher. Whether we will know of this or get of the information of this is unknown, because of we could say we are not really getting any true information anymore, because everything is, whether these people that are part of these information system are aware of it or not, machinery and technology can be, I want to put it this way. Sorry about that. I would put it this way. I struggle with thinking that we are having people within the scientific community that are all under the dark forces. Well, it's not impossible. We could have gone through a process of what we kind of call the body snatcher reality, right? But I more think it's due to that all of the instruments that we are having that are detecting anomalies and are detecting the movements of our sky, of our solar system in space and what's going on, these are being calibrated to emit certain levels of information. It's very easy when you have alien technology, and there's a lot of alien technology up in the ionosphere, which we know from firefighters, or the pilots that are flying up there in the sky. They're seeing all sorts of weird alien technology, and it's very, very easy to modify the ionosphere and prohibits certain levels of information to get into our satellites, to get into the level. It could be the satellites are detecting it because they're in outer space or the top levels of the ionosphere. But once it enters into our atmosphere and are broadcasted back into the machinery on the different science stations that are picking up this information and processed in the computers via the different algorithms, which can be changed as well to emit certain information without the interference of humans, certain levels of information are being omitted. So I'll still keep this, because I can't really see these people that are working there. Whenever I encounter some of these people, they don't seem malicious to me, to be honest. But of course, they can have what we could call possession moments where they don't know what they're doing and they're doing something else, and then they wake up and they don't know what they've been doing. So we are having a lot of scenarios in play here. But let us just play with the innocence card here for now, because the other option just spirals us into a rabbit hole of separation and segregation, which we don't need to tap into right now. So let us just say that it's easier to push it further up and say there are probably alien technology interfering with our technologies that prevents us from understanding what actually is going on in our solar system. Let us put it there. I think that's the right approach right now, because it also gives us the incentive to understand the alien technology more than just blame it on human error or malicious humans, and then begin fighting each other, because that's part of the invasion strategy. So we must be very observant of what kind of thought process that we embark on when we are trying to understand what's going on. So the matter of the fact is, the sun, I want to call it the shun because it's actually spelled with an H, but the sun has done its lone path fall, as it's called within the context. So it has, it's done. It will undergo the processes as we have seen it with different stars in our universal structure. They will eventually become neutron stars, and they will implode and dustify. And then I know that science believes that that will then cluster up again and create new types of vortices from where new planetary systems will arise, which they don't. But that's the prevailing theory of how our solar system came to be, and they are lingering onto that one, latching onto that one, clawing onto that one, because what is left is either the divine creation, which we know is not true because that's not the fact, then it must go in a different direction with advanced civilization. And that's, of course, from where I am working, because these architectural constructions that we are part of are made by extremely advanced civilizations. So that's what we used to be part of. That's what we used to have as a natural higher order science and understanding. When we were living in reality fields, we understood the world that we were part of, not as a God-given created world by forces we had no connection to, but actually and actively, were understanding that we were part of the construction, we were interfering with the construction, and who and what we were influenced the construction. There was a feedback loop between our energy system and the construction or reality field we were part of. So we were intermingled. So what we did affected the reality we were part of, which is why the progressive worlds work under what we call the highest good of the many principle, that everything we do will be tested in all ways and forms to assure the highest progression rate for all involved. And that means the world we were part of. And that's why we made up the principles, the rules of engagement, and the sciences that follow the laws of energies, which were imbued with consciousness and the understanding of how to use consciousness and energy together to create and upgrade reality fields, and at the same time create that type of energy that is not energy, because it is energy imbued with consciousness, transformed into its highest potential rate, its highest potentials and its highest progression rate, with the highest standards and the highest purity rate, from where it creates what we call light filaments that are the true type of life force. So the physical life force we have is not life force. That is the desire body, and that is something entirely else, connected to some of the prohibiting technologies of our reality field. That's what keeps us alive, but it keeps us stuck within artificiality and programs and alien technology that are harvesting this from us. That is engineered that way so they can sustain themselves in their semi-android form. So that's something completely different. Okay, so with that distinction in place, with the shutting down of the sun that were completed here in March 2022, another sequence were put in motion, and that's the ripple effect into the planetary core of our planet and all the planets in our solar system, which many of them have already done their solar system configuration. That's why they are dustifying now, crystallizing, and they are in their end phase of their devastation cycles, hence not holding life. Well, there could be life in artificial dimension attached to it, but not on the physical plane of existence we live within. So our planet is undergoing the same process and will do that over a course of time of 15 years, where our planet will then begin to shed off its rings with the vibration and radiation levels, which will then be dragged out of our solar system and back into the original system it came from, literally as if you're having, how can I put it? Yes, you have a computer, and the ones that are operating the computer saying, well, the computer itself is outdated, but the program will take that one and transfer it via a USB disk, if you like, or a server or something else, some kind of medium. We are transferring it to the medium, and from the medium, it's being reconfigured, updated, new algorithms, new programs, new sub levels of it will then build up the original program structure that is necessary for it to continue into a new modernized quantum computer setting where holographic principles play in as well. So that's what's happening with the architecture of our solar system, because it's energetic and it's holographic and it's built upon possibility and probability features, which is what we understand as quantum principles. So that is what is happening with our solar system. So the reconfiguration on the holographic level of our planetary configuration, the architecture is now resetting the program, and the programs are being pulled out via a medium, transferred into, then upgraded, recalibrated, and transferred into in a new version in the original worlds, where it will then continue as the original setting that it had, because we rearranged our solar system in the times of the LPU to be able to do the restoration of or assist in the Pillar project the different races that had not been able to do the elevation cycles in a very, very long time ago. It's so long time ago, I don't even know how long it is, and it doesn't really matter because the true worlds exist out of time, so we don't have time as we understand of it, so it will be fruitless to try and understand it that way. So that is what it will be done. And then it will be used for those of us who have the configuration. We are now becoming the laggards. We are the ones that are behind. We are struggling now to do our elevation cycle. Those who came to assist the others, we are now the ones that are in the same mess. So we will be struggling to do our elevation cycle. And that means that our holographic system, as our planetary architecture, is being reset. So are we. And that means those of us who came to be part of the LPU and of the true human worlds, as well as the original solar reaches. I did say previously that most of you that are under that, you should have your own program running that will lead you into what we call the progressive humanoid worlds that are opting to not right now. They want to do a couple of cycles still within the humanoid configuration because they still believe technology is the best way. But whereas the true worlds are only and entirely working on consciousness, but we do have technologies, but it works in a different way, which is not what I want to go into here. That's another level of information. So those of us who are part of the true human worlds and came here to be part of the LPU project and the Pillar project, we are now going into our activation cycle alongside with the construction that we were part of building or took part of or chose to work in. And when we entered, we got specific configuration that matched the Pillar project and were created energy systems and different forms of template structures that were suitable for the different works that we were to, and I do say works with an S, not just a misspelling there, but the different types of work and the different works we were to do within the Pillar project. And that's part of our original energy system configuration. So as the planet itself are recalibrating, so will our energy system. And that's part of the activation process that we are undergoing. And whatever is viable, I explain this in details in the whole transition science classes, where I share as much as is possible for those who still have a mental capacity and what we call our recon or configured into the fourth cycle. What you should achieve so that you could complete your fourth cycle and make the jump into the fifth cycle, because that's where the pathways out of the solar system is, because that was the minimum requirement that was set as a deal in the high councils between the LPU solar rishis and the original true human elder councils, that they would only, whoever was part of the LBU would only be let out of it when they had reached the 5th cycle configuration. So that's kind of a law. So we can't exit it in the 4th cycle. But the parallel universal matrix are keeping themselves within the 4th cycle because the 5th cycle will be under the Dark Avatar Collective within these realms. So therefore, they are not interested in us getting ahead and out. And those of us who are doing it, we must be observant of the fork of the 5th cycle that either goes to the left-hand path or to the right-hand path, and know to distinguish between these two and know that false light is not the call, but the true paths are built in our actions, in our energy work, in the ways that we behave among other people, in the ways that we conduct ourselves, in the ways we work with the sciences, and in the ways we try to pick up on our original work and our original works within the Pillar Project and what remains of these viable timelines that were constituted, is the word I get, into the reality field from where we follow the path of our original energy system. So the last portion of the work was, of course, to undo the effects of the timeline event, because we reconfigured our solar system to that during the times of Atlantis. So that's the first step, to unconfigure that one and undo the effects of the timeline event, and then get back into that configuration that would bridge us out of the LPU configuration and back into our original true human configuration. And that one is presently in the 6th cycle. So our true LPU setting is in the 5th cycle, still there, because that was rearranged after the timeline event, upgraded a bit, made more difficult to achieve because the timeline event brought in a lot of unfortunate technology, as I just said, AI and all sorts of stuff, which we don't want in the true worlds. And then, of course, once we have done that, we will then cycle into what we could call the 6th cycle. So what's the plan for humanity right now that are under these ancient settings? Doesn't really matter if you're humanoid or true human. Right now, we all need to get into the 5th cycle, and the 5th cycle should be under the correct configurations of the restoration program, where we will get most of what we need of the sciences from within. We will know what to do from within. We will have the sight from within. We will know how to work on timelines from within. Things can be taught, as I've done in the 4th cycle progression work, the whole transition sciences, the template sciences. These are just giving the general level of it. The individual level will always be ours to accomplish, including the tit-for-tat attempts that are being made by the counterforces to keep us stuck in their timelines, as well as, I keep calling the juggernaut forces that are constantly trying to push us off our original path out of here, which is individual and not a joint path. So we are not to hold hands and go together as couples or as people that are, oh yeah, we'll do this together and then we'll get out together in communities and these kind of things. That has been attempted so many times over the course of history, and none of these communities are there anymore. They being part of a team in that manner demands that each team member has a complete understanding of the manipulation and the game that they are part of, and all of the issues that are in their energy system that does have an effect on the other team members. So that's also the understanding of the 5th cycle. And that's why I'm not advocating right now for doing this as teams, not until we know entirely who and what we are and are able to undo the effects of the tit-for-tat trickery, as well as the juggernaut forces that are constantly trying to bounce us off our path and get ourselves reconstructed and recalibrated should we be around our team members. That's some of the things we learned in the last phases of the Pillar Project before the hijacking. And that made it a very strained environment to be in, because we were trying as teams to undo what was left and avoid the hijacking, because as the different races in our solar system regressed more and more on the different planets and became more and more avian and insectoid and lower level reptoids, the more we opened up to the other levels of reality and the other universal matrices that had reached the same level. And that's why the gates opened up eventually to the regressed races that then came in and hijacked and took us over and enslaved what was left of the original true humans and solar-rich humanoids on this planet and in the solar system. And you can look at the planets around us and see what has happened to these once these races are done. They are still operating in their artificial adjacent realities that is on our planet as well. And that is within that context you are to understand the alien agenda, as well as the UFOs and the crafts in the sky and the crafts in the ocean, and all of these questions that I know researchers are asking themselves within the UFO community. Why are there UFOs in the oceans? Because there are science labs down there, and there are different workstations down there belonging to these races, because that's on the planet but out of the sight of humans. It's easier to operate down there than subterranean, which kind of indicates caverns and old pathways, which we know is there, but that's mainly the reptoid races that chose that one because they can live in this extremely cold environment. Whereas if you do it sub-oceanic or on the bottom, the floor of our planet, which can be very deep down, it's very easy to access the old gate systems and by that transfer either via the mediums of our planet and the electromagnetic fields and grid and networks and travel on these lines of energy, or use the old gate systems that are close to the planet, because at the bottom of the ocean is within the third and second and first cycle after the timeline event, which is why we don't have access to it. So you can say the closer to the core, you have the first cycle around the core, you have the second cycle around the core, you have the third cycle around the core. That's what we call the underworld, because that's part of the ancient civilizations that we don't have access to anymore on a conscious level, but it is part of our human DNA. And then we have the fourth cycle before the fall of Atlantis, and we had the reseeding of the fourth cycle after the fall of Atlantis. Then the reseeding after the fourth. After the fall of Atlantis, the fourth cycle after the fall of Atlantis 250,000 years ago, where that was the first fall, so to speak, in times of human history. We got the reseeding of a new type of mammal bodies, etc., etc. That's the fourth cycle in that version, which were recalibrated and changed many times. First portions of our planet still part of the original fourth cycle and what we call the true fourth dimension, and later on excluded entirely from that, and that was part of the hijacking, where everything that we could have got access to consciously were rearranged into different spiritual religious programs, where what we used to be part of and were acknowledging and have knowledge of were put into the hands of the quote-unquote gods or the aliens and their technology. So that's the movement that were made there, completely excluding us from any higher level of understanding. And then we technically had a fifth cycle after the fall of Atlantis, but that one collapsed as well, because the Atlantean genome and the humanoid genes are, they have so much third cycle energy in them, so they are difficult to repair. Hence the attempt to recreate in the fourth cycle a new type of genome, a new type of structure under the Pleiadians, but unfortunately, again, aligning with some of the Syrian groups, and they were infiltrated, and by that project collapsed, including some of the Pleiadian races that were taken over in the galactic wars back in the third cycle before the timeline event, and they had this weird backdoor that led into some of the severe old levels of the galactic third cycle rounds of ill-mindedness. Anyways, it's very complicated when we try to think of this in a linear manner, which is impossible because time does not exist in a holographic world. So we're here talking about networks and gridworks and how to travel on the different timelines with our consciousness potentials, and from there investigate the different nodal points of existence that are in alignment with our genetics, and not as much link up to historical context and settings, because in our reconstruction work, it's our individual history that matters and not the collective history, other than just to get the context, as in when we had the Supreme Court ruling here on the 25th, which is interesting. Last year on the 21st, we had the Pentagon report, right? What came out of that? Anyways, but the matter of the fact is that which seen in a line of event probably had its purpose. That's where it was kind of acknowledged that, yeah, we have aliens there. Anyways, just let it hanging there, not going into further speculation. But there is definitely something that is connected to that. The date 25th of June, if some of the old documents and some things, whenever something is seeded in America, somehow has to do something with that date. I've not gone back in time with it and figure out why that is, but it connects to some level of the spiral, the annual spiral, that on the 25th of June on each level of the spiral of the networks in America ties into some ancient event from where specific type of energies can be inserted into reality field and then activate different grid works and networks, as I said. Okay, so just to put things a little bit in context, a lot of here and there and everywhere, where we're heading now is that with the serious events that have been put in motion now, we are now effectively going into the planetary activation cycle where our construction will begin its completion and shutdown mechanisms, and that will influence us as well, those of us who are part of the original construction. We will do this work. We have, again, an inbuilt system that goes with the original configuration. So if we are able to activate our original architecture, and by that, the original genetics that are part of the Pillar Project, as well as the true human worlds, and live by the original understandings of these and not the religions or the spiritual teaching systems and what have you. These are derivatives of the original teaching systems of the solar rishi humanoids, as well as the original true human races, after it was agreed or that we were reseeded into the fourth cycle. Before the hijacking, we had different teaching systems that came in play there. And they were, of course, taken over and altered by the hijackers and became the current day spiritual teaching systems and religions and everything that is ruling humanity and literally leading them astray, including all types of Buddhism, all types of Christianity, all types of Islam, all types of Jainism, all types of Hinduism, all types of, all types of Chinese teachings. I forgot the name, Confucianism, all types. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what belief system and what religious system and what spiritual system and what health system or the 5 element systems or the Chinese acupuncture or the meridian system or the chakra system. It doesn't matter. These are all under prohibiting technology. So if those of you think, oh yeah, I got the right one. No, you don't. Look for the cubes. Look for the iCubes. Everything that's coming out now are linked up to cubes. They're part of the original prohibiting technologies, and they're being altered to derail you into either the parallel universal matrix, the dark avatar collective, or timelines where you don't belong. So this is where you need to get what you need to know from within, and that can be tricked as well. You can be altered, you can be shape-shifted, you can be recalibrated. There are so many things going on right now on our planet that the game that we are in to do the completion is a steep learning curve of maturity and awakening processes that my best guess is that most of you will have a little bit of difficulty with, especially if you kind of just get on board right now. There are other groups that will be activated for this process. They have already been seeded in, and some of them will be the process for the ones that are helping others to get out, and others will be for the ones that are preventing others from getting out. So those of you who are thinking, oh, I'm helping, you might actually be preventing, because you are in your attempt to help others are emitting types of energies that are effectively taking others out if you don't know what you're doing and how you're doing it, and do not have the sight, but just go with your good human heart and trying to help, when the matter of the fact is that you're actually doing the opposite. And then there are ones that are actively are there to help, but they are not to help on human to human level, because there are some very ancient laws, and that unfortunately with the third cycle coming back in, that is highly run by individualistic means, that gives the air of the more older types of fifth cycle, where we are doing this as individuals, and by that are struggling with what is in our template and in our energy system and the timelines that we are on. And we are to do this as lone riders in the fifth cycle, but we can eventually, once we know what we're made of and who we are and where we are and what we're supposed to do and how we configure and reconfigure and clear and transform energy, we can join up as teams, but we can only do it under some strict rules of correct partnerships, as well as correct commitment and the correct use of energy and the correct use of power, which are part of the principles of the original fifth cycle. So this puts limitations, because our human mind does not know what that effectively means, until we have had enough encounters with the different races and understand that this is a completely different ball game, and what we understand as being the right ways of doing things are not the way the things were done originally. These are part of the enslavement programs and the prohibiting technologies to keep us in a tribal hive mind structure where we think that we have to go as a group. But the matter of the fact is we must go as individuals, because we are born alone and we are leaving this world alone. You know that. You are not holding hands with your besties when you leave this world in time of death. This is the individual gate systems that we must travel through as individuals, and our energy system will determine that. However, of course, we can help each other, we can amplify each other, we can assist each other in best way possible. But from my angle of things, those of you who are just doing it out of kindness, I would be very careful with that in the times that we are in. We never know how far we are being manipulated. Only those of you who truly understand the game of the races that are now taking over our planet will be equipped to effectively help anybody else. And that will be a very difficult learning curve where you have to have an insight in everything that's going on, going back into planetary history, solar system history, galactic history, universal history, etc., including systemic history, and knowing what you were there, knowing what you were doing there, knowing why you came here, knowing what your purpose is here. And if your original purpose was to transform energy and work with plants, you're not supposed to work with people. So if you came here to undo the effects of the timeline event and you were to work on the genetic level as part of the advisory board that was supposed to assist the different lineages and races that came here in their reconstruction of their original architecture, then you are allowed to work with people. But if you didn't, you're not allowed to work with people, and you are transgressing according to the original construction dynamics. Because we have a template and an energy system that is engineered for a specific purpose. And with that, amplify positively with what we're working with. So if we are engineered to work with technology and we are working with humans, we will activate their transhuman level because our engineering is configured to work with technology. So that would be a very bad choice, even though you feel a strong need to do so. But that would be under the manipulation of the different transhuman parallel universal matrix races that are here now. So we need to know where our core skills are and what our strengths are and what we originally were supposed to do. And that's part of the awakening process. But once you align with your true configuration within the Pillar Project and the solar system, whether it's under the solar riches, they worked on different constructions, and the true humans under the Pillar Project, you will get that. It will literally come natural to you because it's part of your original energy system. And as we move into that understanding, we will then begin to reconfigure ourselves to the original purposes and functions that is in alignment with our energy system. And that is part of the reconstruction process. That will automatically lead you to the timelines that will align with the original purposes and functions of our reality field. And by that, speed up and influence your energy system to reconfigure and heal itself because you're working with it in the correct manner. It's like doing exercise. You're training it back into what it was meant to do. And those of you doing exercise, some are for fitness, some are for yoga, others are to CrossFit, others are doing swimming, etc., etc. It all comes down to who and what we are. And that is part of the awakening process, to get back into our positions, to get back into our workstation levels and capacities and skills. And that's the tools that we are going to rebuild our energy system with, because we are effectively working with what we have engineered ourselves to work with by our own choice when we entered this solar system. That will lead us our path out, because to get back out, you need to know what you were when you came in. That's the full circle. So to round this one up with a lot of loose ends, I'm just putting in a process here. I'm just seeding in a process from where there is a steep learning curve. And those of you who are part of the original Solar Rishi missions, you have a mission statement. Those of you who are part of the original Pillar Project, you will be more aligned with the teachings I am sharing. But either way, things can only be given on a general level, and where we are now and with what has been given and with what is out there and what you should know by now, those of you who've been doing this for decades, you should be at that point where you will begin to work with what you get from within. Enough asking others for questions and answers and whatever. You can work with others, such as me, in whole sessions where we can have, where I can put you back on track and help you to stay focused, being a facilitator and a mentor. And I can work in different ways and forms as a psychotherapist with some of the emotional issues with this work and what it takes to build that fifth cycle consciousness structure, and with that personality matrix it takes to be able to do the elevation work and the getting out of this system following with the original configuration that belongs to our consciousness structure. So that is, of course, a psychological transition, and that can be done in what I call transformative conversations with me, where we will work with what are you, where are you going, what is your highest level, what are you supposed to be, and how do you do this, and how can that be transformed into some kind of effective work inside this reality, as we are trying to exemplify the original ways that are in alignment with our energy system, as well as with the original pillar project. So to end this one, because there's 10 times more to be said, my work is now divided into two groups: the whole academy, which will change into literally a science academy, and then the Randy Green .1, the whole advanced psychotherapy, where if you choose to do so, you can work with me on a personal level, where we can discover who and what you are individually. But you still need the sciences, because it goes hand in hand. You need the history, you need the sciences, and you need the psychology to be able to do this work. And as I said, history is divided into your individual experiences as well as the collective time streams, from where you just get the contextual setting so you can navigate in space and understand yourself in that space, in that time, in that configuration. But what you are to take away from that is always your individual perception, your individual experiences, and the individual energy work that will reconstruct your energy system. So to put it that way, to know about the Second World War is you just clear out what you were in that past life, close down the timelines there, and move on and release energy so that you can focus on who and what you are in the now, because now we're reconstructing ourselves, pulling everything out of the past as this timeline collapses, and we ensure that whatever's left of viable potentials of our original energy system is not stuck in these timelines to be harvested from races that could then potentially use it as a hostile takeover mechanism and a backdoor into the true human world. So that's also why we're only getting a limited portion of time to do this. And if we don't succeed, they will collapse these timelines. They will extract whatever's a viability there. And with that, if we still have not got our time continuum, so to put that way, our architecture, our template, and our timeline structures and everything that's connected to us in check, once we reach that final call, because it's going through 12 stages of callings that will come now. We have got the big one with the planetary activation cycle. That was the first big call. Many of you remember you had that one in 1999 when we began the stellar activation cycle. The call has been come out for the planetary activation cycle, and the first level has just been put in due to what has happened on the 25th in America. So the next stage, the next call has come. So we are now on the first ring of the 12 ring steps ladder out of our solar system. So it all depends on if things are going very south in the world, then these steps will come in a quicker succession, which means they could come within a year, or if people kind of get their shit together and make the right human choices and are playing within what we call humanitarian principles, where we act effectively trying to assist each other in the issues that we are standing in front, because we have a lot of issues: environmental, financial, wars, famine, diseases, you pick them. we need to work together to solve these issues. But if humanity constantly segregate and revert and go back into the third cycle, well, these callings will be more frequent. And those of us who are on the viable timelines, we will learn to jump the different rings of progression to get to the point where we effectively and are solidified within the fifth cycle of the original true solar rishi realms, or the original progressive worlds, within a sector that is called the restoration program, from where we can do what we need to do for the remains of our life. But we still have to play within this reality field, and that's the law of the jurisdictions, which as we learn to play correctly with our construction and our energy system and everything that we are, will be able to create these little jurisdictions, whether they will just be individual jurisdictions, our own little energy system and our own home, or they will be on a grander scale that will be shown in the future. That is all up to us and how well we are doing our activation and clearing work. So I think I will end this video here, just having put it in there, because the second calling has just been sounded today, and I think it's just fair enough that I give you a little bit of information of what's happening. So if you have this weird feeling of rush inside, and you have this weird feeling of hearing a horn that is sounding, that's where you sit down in meditation and energy work and figure out what the fuck is going on, and then begin to truly understand that now we are shifting everything, what were part of things until today are going to change tremendously in the world around us. And we are now going into the completion cycle where everybody will be tested on their energy system of who and what they are, and how they perceive themselves, and how they are going to apply themselves due to the causes of distraught that we have around us, how they are going to alleviate that, how they're going to transform energy, what positions they choose to play in the completion games, in the activations, planetary activation cycle, how they choose to implement that, how they choose to segregate themselves or become more inclusive, how they choose to stand on their own belief systems and then by in that one alienate everybody else, or are trying to find joint solutions across nations, across gender, across sexual orientation, across religions, across everything that we kind of know of. You know that, you have heard that many times. You choose what kind of future you want to be part of by your everyday energy work, the way you conduct yourself, the way you are around others, the understanding of how to effectively navigate in an environment where some people are your friends and some people are not. This has nothing to do with their human form or their interface system. It has all to do with their energy system, and learning to understand how to navigate in an energetic holographic environment that are now effectively reactivating all of the cycles of our planet, of which there are 12. And some of them are more benevolent, and some of them are very, very hostile due to the failure and the fall and what has happened on our planet in all of its course of time after the timeline event. So that is in essence rounded up what the planetary activation cycle is all about. And I have put out other videos here earlier explaining things in a little bit different way, and to say it as it is, I will again, as always, focus on the different teachings and sciences that are necessary for those of us who are doing the fifth cycle activation processes. We need the sciences. So again, we have a context. In the fourth cycle, we had the progression work as a context. And in the fifth cycle, we will have the fifth cycle sciences and the Pillar Project original work, station modalities and technologies, and what we were working with effectively inside the solar system to recalibrate, reconstruct, and transform the energies of our reality field out of the timeline event configuration. So that is where our future works and work should take place. And for us within the base program, we can transform that into configurations of working on environmental issues, working on psychological issues, working on everything that kind of transforms energy somehow, somewhere. But there's a lot to be said about that. And I'm just seeding things in here, and we have just begun this work that will run for the next 25 years. So thank you for listening in. And for more information, I have put here, you can see the 2 websites I have got, the Whole Academy and the randygreen.1. And the last one is what we call the Whole Advanced Psychotherapy. And we have got a lot of work ahead of us. And one of the main features for those of us who are doing the 5th cycle is that we are lone riders. But there are, and when you get to that point, you get out of the tribal consciousness structure, you will be more and more comfortable in the everyday work of reconstructing and transforming energy and trying to build a better world within the timelines that you're part of, because that is what we originally took out and set out to do in the Pillar Project. So that will just be aligning ourselves with the original configuration of our energy system. And to put it in a very difficult kind of understanding is that, yes, we will build with all of these principles, even though the world around us will begin its devastation cycle. So that is where, again, we need to be on track on our own relative reality and the timelines that we are on that will ingrain certain perception of reality, that will ingrain in us the perception of energy and our planet and what we need to do in a different manner that will assist us in the reconfiguration, rebuilding work of our energy system via the different modalities and functionalities that we take onto ourselves. So we will literally create an alternate reality to the existing base program. And that is how we're going to do this. Thank you.